All right, welcome to this explainer. If you've ever felt that familiar pit in your stomach when pulling into a crowded, incredibly deep bay, well, you are definitely in the right place. Today, we're distilling expert maritime sources to completely elevate your practical sailing skills far beyond the basics, focusing entirely on advanced anchoring and mooring techniques.
So let's just dive right into this highly counterintuitive question that honestly plagues so many charters. As the experts at Sail Ionian point out, it seems a bit ridiculous to drop a heavy anchor, only to reverse and tie your shiny, multi-million-dollar fiberglass yacht to a dead tree on the shore with a really long rope. But as you'll see, in some of the world's absolute best cruising grounds, this isn't just a fun option, it is literally the only way to stay safe. Here's a quick look at what we're covering today. 1. The deep water problem. 2. Mastering stern tying. 3. The science of anchoring. 4. Trimaran mooring tactics. And 5. Safety, security, and departure.
Section 1. The deep water problem, navigating Mediterranean depths. If you're cruising in places like the Ionian, Croatia, or Turkey, you know the seabed drops off like a cliff right off the shoreline. Because of this, standard free swinging in these deep fjord-like bays, it's just not going to happen. The RIA teaches a standard anchoring scope of 4 times the water depth. But what do you do when the middle of the bay is 100 meters deep? Like the crew from Sailing Fair Isle notes, the banks are simply too steep to free anchor, and that makes longlining or stern tying an absolute necessity. To put this into perspective, think about the math here. The average charter yacht carries about 70 meters of chain. If you try to anchor in 15 meters of water near the shore and let yourself free swing, your swinging circle on that 70 meters of chain is massive. It's inevitably going to push you backward right onto jagged rocks, or swing you out into the middle of the bay where the depth absolutely plummets to 30 or 100 meters. Your anchor will just instantly pull out. You have to tie back to the shore. Moving on to Section 2, Mastering Stern Tying, Gear and Execution. To pull this off without becoming a tangled mess in front of an audience of seasoned sailors, you need the right setup. According to the Sailing Fair Isle crew, ditching heavy sinking ropes for the right gear changes everything. They highly recommend 100 meters of floating Dinghy line on a stern reel. That floating line completely prevents catastrophic propeller tangles while you're reversing. You also want locking carabiners to quickly lasso sharp rocks. And hey, if you're forced to use a traditional sinking line, pop a buoy on it. Not only does this keep shore rats from using your line as a tightrope to board your boat, but it also stops the heavy webbing from vibrating and creating this unbearable resonance noise in high winds. And guys, this brings us to what absolutely not to do. The experts at Sail Ionian hilariously recount the extreme and highly discouraged lengths some guests go to just to avoid using the dinghy to run lines ashore. Honestly, leave the grappling hooks and rope guns to the action movies. You need to use your dinghy to physically take the lines to land. So taking it step by step from the pros, it's all about preparation. Have your crew member in the dinghy with that windward line completely ready before you drop. And you must drop the anchor way further out than you think you need, at least 5 or 6 boat lengths from the shore. Why? Because in 15 meters of water, it takes 15 to 20 seconds for the anchor just to reach the bottom. Once your lines are secured ashore, always tension the chain hard on the windlass. If the tension drops, you are not dug in. You're probably just dragging on weed. Section 3. The Science of Anchoring, Physics of Wind and Waves. All right, having mastered the shore tide, let's look at some hard scientific data from Practical Sailor to understand open water behavior and why some sailors actually try reversing their entire setup. When you're free swinging on a bow anchor, boats naturally hunt or swing side to side. This is called yawing, and Practical Sailor's testing reveals a pretty frightening statistic. Extreme yawing exposes the broad topsides of your yacht to the wind, which increases the load on your anchor by up to 240%. That is a massive risk to your holding power. Because the center of windage is forward of the center of underwater resistance, some folks theorize you should just anchor directly from the stern in open water. Practical Sailor actually tested this, and while stern anchoring does almost eliminate dangerous yawing, dropping it from 140 degrees down to just 30 degrees, it totally ruins livability. It introduces this awful wave slap against the transom, irregular pitching, and leaves your open cockpit entirely exposed to swamping and rain. The final verdict? Stick to bow anchoring in open water and just use a bridle or riding sail to stop the yawing. Section 4. Trimaran mooring tactics, handling high windage. Now we know not all boats behave the same way. If you talk to the experts at Corsair Marine or Dragonfly, they'll tell you the difference between monohulls and trimarans is night and day. Monohulls carry heavy, deep momentum. A trimaran, on the other hand, is incredibly lightweight but has massive side windage. It accelerates and stops on a dime, and it will slide sideways instantly if you aren't paying attention. Crucially, you've got to keep the dagger board down when maneuvering, otherwise the boat simply won't pivot or turn against the wind. And of course, their swing wing systems are amazing, letting you fold their width by 50% for those tighter docks. Because these boats are so light with all that windage, they can literally sail themselves straight forward right over their own anchor or mooring line, loosening the gear and causing them to drift. To fix this, experts recommend rigging an asymmetrical bridle. By making one side of the bridle just a bit shorter, you force the trimaran to sit at a slight angle. You're essentially putting it on a constant tack, which safely controls its movement. And for you solo multi-hull sailors, catching a mooring buoy doesn't have to be a frantic scramble. This brilliant trick uses the wide spacing of the trimaran's hulls to your advantage. If you have a low, soft gunnel dinghy already attached to your mooring, you can actually sail the trimaran right over the dinghy. It passes harmlessly right between the main hull and the outer float, or AMA. Then you just walk out onto the trampoline and casually grab the painter line. Easy. Section 5. Safety, Security, and Departure. Universal Best Practices. Bringing it all home, let's talk about the universal rules to keep your gear and your vessels safe overnight, and how to actually get out of there smoothly the next morning. It starts with calculating your scope. Standard training usually tells you to use a 4-to-1 ratio of chain to water depth, but our deep water Mediterranean and global cruising sources, they strongly advise bumping that up to 5-to-1 or even 8-to-1, depending on local weather severity and how packed the anchorage is. Let's wrap up with a bulletproof security and departure routine. The global voyagers from the Sailing Arario channel remind us that the job isn't done just because the engine is off. Always set your GPS anchor alarms. And hey, if the water is warm enough, literally grab a mask and dive in to visually inspect how your anchor is set. To prevent theft in busy anchorages, close up all your hatches when leaving the boat and hide a GPS tracker like an AirTag on your dinghy. Finally, when you're leaving a stern tie, you always release the windward shoreline last so you don't blow onto your neighbor, and haul that anchor up fast so you don't drift over and snag their chain. So, armed with this knowledge, from the science of yawing to the mechanics of deep-water stern tying and multi-hull maneuvering, you're no longer limited to crowded marinas. But mastering the perfect anchorage means truly respecting the physics of the sea. What other invisible forces do you think are impacting your vessel right now? Keep learning, stay curious, and thank you for joining me for this explainer. We will see you out on the water.